Welcome to Phil and Ted's Sexy Boomer Show. I'm Ted Bonnet.
I'm Phil the Rocket Proctor.
Hey, how are you, Phil?
I'm feeling all engines are go. I watched Destination Moon last night on TCM. Well, I just love those colored spacesuits that they were in. That's the one thing I remember from that movie. It was so much fun. And the fact that they had to throw their radio out to save themselves.
Oh, my God, really?
And right before that, they showed 2001. Oh, my God.
That's the funny thing about radio, because it just goes out into space forever and ever.
It does, yes.
And,
you can catch this show out in Jupiter if you want.
Yeah, if anything's going to bring them on.
That's right. Well, we have somebody who's been way out there for many years with us today.
A radio legend.
A radio legend in his own mind, Frazer Smith. Say hello, Frazer.
Fellas, how are you? And when a boomer says all systems are go, you better back up.
Yeah, that's true.
Because anything could happen.
Yeah. Boom, boom, boom. So we're going to talk a lot about the origins of your career, basically, which is in a way kind of a microcosm of other boomers who've gotten into radio over the years. There have been so many people were so influential when the music was happening in the 60s and the 70s, It was an open door to jump in and have some fun, wasn't it?
Well, as you know, FM radio was nowhere.
That's right.
It was a dead zone. And
a write-off.
It was. That's exactly right. And AM was the thing, and all the boss jocks and all that. And then at late '60s, I think somebody said, "Well, nobody's doing anything with that FM. Let's give it to the hippies."
Yeah.
Right.
It's got 2 channels.
Yeah. And then they started to have FM radio, and a lot of it was rock based around music, you said.
That's right.
We just lost the great Jim Ladd, who was a legendary DJ and my good friend, and worked at many stations with him. And he was kind of the archetype for that kind of DJ.
Right.
That late night, how you doing, everybody? I'm Jim Ladd.
Here's
the Doors.
I've been smoking all day.
Yeah, and he literally was. When I first met Ladd, I was at KMET, and I opened the door, and a cloud of smoke poured out. He's listening to the Doors, The End, and he's wearing sunglasses at night with candles and the whole.
Oh, yeah.
Well, who was it that just died?
Hey, it was like, who is it just died? The guy up in San Francisco.
Who used to drop mushrooms on his overnight show.
Yeah.
That could be anybody from.
I dropped some today. See, look, they're lying over there.
Yeah.
I tell you.
That's why it's all systems go.
Yeah, that's right. And of course, I had a wonderful thought that went right out of my head about radio. But how did you? Okay, we go back. We have an interesting history phrase because here's the connection. Firesign Theater really became successful because of FM radio.
Sure.
Because they could play our long records, a side of our records, which were long stories, psychedelic stories. And so we started picking up a college audience that way. And it really, really helped promote our career. Now, at one point, and we'll talk a little bit about this too, Procter & Bergman stepped away from the Firesign Theater. We broke away, we didn't leave the Firesign
Phil
Theater.
Proctor and Peter Bergman. We wanted to go on the road. And Phil Austin, God bless him, one of the funniest men in the world, he didn't like to fly. So whenever we did our tours, he would get into a car or a Volkswagen bus or a truck with his 6 dogs and Una, his wife, and they'd slowly make their way cross country to the venues that we had set up, designed to accommodate his arrival. We'd fly in early and we'd do promotion. Phil would get there for the tech rehearsal, and on we'd go. And then after it was over, they'd hop back in the car, and they'd move on, visiting friends across country till we got to our next gig. So at one point, Peter and I said, we got to get out there. We got to meet our fans. We got to promote Firesign and see the world. And we did. And one of the places we played was Ann Arbor, Michigan, where the buildings rusted. Right? The high iron content.
Yeah, high iron content.
And
I still have it.
Where did we perform that we met you?
Well, let's see. Where were you performing at? It was at the University of Michigan.
There you go.
I'm trying to think of the venue. But we were huge fans of yours and Peter's.
So you're a Michigan person.
Yeah, and I'm from the Detroit area. Ann Arbor is outside of Detroit.
That's right.
And I went to Western Michigan University in Kalamazoo. Lovely Kalamazoo. And Wags and I, Daddy Wags was my comedy partner, and he was the program director at the college radio station. And as you said, we used to play Firesign. We were huge fans.
Yeah.
And then I had the overnight shift, so I would play you guys the entire album side.
Yeah, that's our man.
Yeah, and so we were huge fans. And when we saw that you were playing in Ann Arbor, we went to the show, and then afterwards talked to you guys afterwards. And you were very gracious, and we went to lunch the next day.
Yeah.
And then we did a show. We did a show. We were playing a little venue, the Michigan Theater.
I remember watching
Playing the
show.
Michigan Theater.
Yeah.
And Wags and I were like a two-man team.
Very funny.
Which we had. Wags was a funny dude, right?
Yeah.
And he later had a crazy history, but he and I did this show, and then we opened for you guys. So you said, hey, you guys are pretty good. Why don't you come to Chicago with us and open at the Amazing Grace, which is a big club in Chicago.
Yeah.
A pretty big club. Famous club. So we went, and we were just thrilled, and we were in college still, and we go, okay, we're opening for the guys, you know.
Oh, cool.
And we just made up our act. We had no act. And it actually went pretty well. And then I remember Peter made a joke about when we actually dropped a prop on the stage, and he picked it up, and he did a bunch of jokes off of that. And we thought, wow, now our idols are making fun of us, you know, which is always
Having
cool.
fun with you.
Yeah. And we had so then you guys had said, hey, you guys are pretty good. Why don't you go out to the West Coast?
Yep.
And I remember getting out here and thinking, all right, well, I'm going to get a hold of one of
You
these.
were foolish enough to actually take our advice.
Yeah. Well, I was pretty foolish. So I came out, and Wags did not come with me. And so I thought, well, I'm going out there anyway.
Yeah, he joined the CIA.
He did, actually. But we can't talk about that.
Can't talk about it.
Who needs to die over that? But that was Wags. He was a real interesting dude. So anyway, I got out here, and I got a hold of Phil Austin, who you mentioned, who I always was a huge fan of Phil Austin. I thought he was a genius.
Oh, he was one of the spokes in our wheel.
Was he not a genius, right? All you guys were. All you guys were.
He was a natural genius, Phil Austin.
And so
what a funny man.
I said, hey, do you want to do a show on KROQ? Because my friends had told me about KROQ. And it was a little station.
Now, this is out in L.A. This is here in L.A.
Yeah, in Los Angeles. And the station was in Pasadena.
Okay.
And
this is the genesis of KROQ. I mean, this was really early days?
Yes, early days, late 70s.
Yeah.
And
where were they broadcasting?
They were broadcasting from the Pasadena Hilton Hotel. And they were in a suite.
They had a closet?
Well, it was an actual suite. And you go in there, and there was room service trays piled up.
How sweet is that?
And they had these old, Flash Gordon-type pots that you twist.
Yeah, cool.
And I told you about the first night on the air. I dragged Phil down there, and he really didn't. He against his will. Yeah, right. And so we're doing a show, and all of a sudden this little Hispanic guy jumps out from underneath we didn't even know he was there. Underneath the thing, the station went off. You hear this zzz, and it stops. So we're like, okay, is the show over? What's going on? And he jumps out. He opens up a switchblade. And I'm thinking, we're getting jacked on our first show.
In the studio.
Yeah. And it turns out he's the engineer for the station, Al Ramirez. And so he literally hot-wired the station back.
Those were the days, weren't they?
Well, I loved it, but Phil was like, wait a minute, dude.
Yeah,
this
sure.
guy?
But I remember when I came out here in 77 looking see if I wanted to come out here from New York. I had heard I was already in freeform radio back east, but I always looked at the West Coast as really the great out there radio, and I sought out KROQ, and I heard your show, Nightshift.
The Hollywood Nightshift.
Now.
Yeah.
And then
fast forward.
That to me was that was seminal to me because I realized, wow, you can really go way out there and do this. And I kind of went back to New York and started emulating that. So, go see. It's amazing how radio. Now, I talked to my daughter who's in college now, and we were talking about it last week. She said, Dad, nobody has radios.
Yeah, nobody
has radios.
And that's kind of sad in a way. We're all doing podcasting now, and I'm doing it too, and everybody is. But I do miss the radio days, and I think the reason is it was a paycheck. No, it was and a very small one at that.
Very small.
No, but the thing is that it was immediate.
Yes.
And podcasting a lot of times, plays later. You tape it and then it plays another time.
It's a media.
Well, it's a lot. Yeah.
Now
at KROQ, what was amazing was in '77 they were both AM and FM. So we're going with our crazy stuff on AM radio and FM radio, and there was nothing happening at that time. We landed at a time when everything was really flat in the market. So we came on with this crazy show, and everybody it was
Hollywood Nightshift.
It's what you call viral now.
Who was your sponsor?
Victor's House of Barbecued Bats.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Especially the flat bat. And those were extra good.
What night of the week were you on?
We were on Sunday night live. We were live. And we would have, and then we added a performer, Michael C. Gwynn.
Michael C. Gwynn.
Who was a legendary actor and performer.
Wonderful voice.
Yeah, the very deep voice.
Great
and he
voice.
So he came in and he kind of engineered everything. He'd been a DJ for many years in San Francisco and around everywhere. And we would put on sound effect records and then just ad-lib over the sound effect records. And we had this thing called Train Ride to Hell, where we were going on the train ride, and every level we would stop at, there'd be pneumatic drills, and we'd be talking about that. And
who was your engineer for that?
Michael.
Michael did that.
Yeah, and our producer was Al Ramirez, the guy with the switchblade.
God, yeah, Firesign worked with the real Earl Jive on, I think, the Firesign Theater Radio Hour, and he would do the same thing. He would just drop sound effects on us whenever he,
We did the same thing in Connecticut. Sunday night was the same thing. Sunday night was typically a desert for our audience.
Yeah.
And they didn't care what you did. So we started to do an improv comedy show. And really what it was going to see improv on the radio. And, it was really easy pickings. You could go, we were number one in Connecticut. It was a station called WPLR. And
you became tremendously popular.
It was a great time. It's a really fertile time and territory. Sunday nights were a great time to do improv.
Because not much goes on Sundays. So,
everybody got home from church and they were, all bummed out.
Well, we better listen to this train ride to hell. But we were on there, and all of a sudden that Hollywood Nightshift blew up. So they gave me a spin-off show, my own show.
Uh-huh.
And so I was on KROQ Friday and Saturday nights, and I could play whatever I wanted. And it was a fertile time musically, too, because all those bands were breaking. All those new wave bands and punk bands. And I remember the first night on the air, Phil and I met Deborah Harry and Blondie. We met the Sex Pistols, half the Sex Pistols, and then the Ramones and Tom Petty. And none of them, this is our first night on the air, and none of them had any product. No, they didn't have product out.
They were just performing.
They were on Rodney Bingenheimer's show.
Sure. Yep, Rodney Bingenheimer.
And Rodney on the Rock, and Rodney was on after us. So Rodney said to me, "They're all going to be huge." And I go, "Yeah, right, Rodney." Yeah. And then they were all huge. About a year later, and so we were breaking all that music. So I was playing this music, and I really didn't know what I was doing. I'm coming from the Midwest. I'm used to Ted Nugent and the Eagles and all the classic rock stuff.
Yeah.
And so Rodney would tell me, "Well, Fraze, you got to play this, And I'd play, Elvis Costello, and I'd go, "Who is that?" And I'd play it. And all of a sudden, everybody in town's listening to my show. So again, it was a viral moment. I had the entire,
and that's what's missing. Podcasting is wonderful. We do it, we love it. But you're right. What you said earlier is that the spontaneity and the energy of live radio.
Hey, that's why we love doing this show
as a collective radio experience.
This is a great show, guys, and you're in a good pocket because Boomer stuff is big. And you guys are talented, and this venue. I mean, this style of performing.
True.
I think you're going to go really high place.
This is Phil and Ted's Sexy Boomer Show, by the way, with Ted Bonnet
and Phil Proctor and our guest Frazer Smith.
Where is he?
And the one thing too, one last bit of business here is we want to announce that our shows, after they broadcast, become podcasts, so you can listen to them on demand, and you can go directly to our website, sexyboomershow.com, and hear episodes, or just search Sexy Boomer Show on your favorite podcast platform, and you will find it. And we are now getting down to business here. We are now posting 2 shows a week.
That's right.
On the site. The way it's going to work is the show we do today will be on the following Monday.
You can listen to yourself, Frazer. I know that.
So come on.
That'll be a unique experience.
Yes,
for you.
I rarely do that.
And then on Thursdays of every week, we're going to be posting one of the many shows we've done over the last year that we have yet to post.
Right, including some that we did in New York City.
Yeah, so
including some that you haven't ever done.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
Those are the best shows, too, by the way.
So sexyboomershow.com is where to go when you have nothing better to do. But we're talking to Frazer Smith, a radio legend, stand-up comic here in Los Angeles, and you have a story about a parking lot.
Well, this is when I was at KLOS. I did mornings at KLOS for about, I think, 10 years. And I was never on time. In 10 years. And, I was in my 20s, so I was a party animal. In fact, I created the term party animal, for better or for worse.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And I lived up to it. I was a maniac, and I was out in the clubs all night, every night, and then I tried to make my morning show.
Oh,
so I come racing.
What time were you on?
I was on at 6. And so, and I would get there at about 5:58.
Oh.
And the closest parking spot was my boss's parking spot, right next to the station. So I come screeching in there like something out of a movie. I just come screeching, and then run in. And then during a commercial break, I would come out and move my car.
Okay.
So I wouldn't get in trouble.
Yeah, right.
Well, one day I forgot. And so somebody comes in and they go, hey, they're towing your car.
Oh, no.
So I ran out there with a microphone in the
Towed
parking lot,
away,
and I go,
towed
who's towing my car? It turns out it was my boss who was having my car towed.
Of course he was.
He didn't even ask me. He just towed
Nice.
the car.
Teach you a lesson.
He was a dick. And, that's putting it nicely. This guy was one of those bosses like in the Howard Stern movie, the pig vomit guy, So he's having my car towed, and my slogan was too hip. That was my slogan, too hip. I can tell you at sometime how that happened. But anyway, we had the bumper stickers, too hip and everything. So my boss got a too hip sticker before anybody else had it. We put it on.
Because you had hip replacements.
Yes. Well, now that would be my.
That's right.
My thing would
Two
be
hips.
Two hips.
TWO.
Both replaced. So anyway, it's on the back of his Cadillac. And so I said, well, if you see a silver Cadillac with a too hip sticker on it, give him the finger. So I had a lot of fans back then. The whole town was kind of listening to my show. So everywhere he went, every stoplight, I said, honk at him and flip him off. So everybody's flipping off my boss. So finally he came crawling to me 2 weeks later. He goes, call off the dogs. I can't take it anymore. Because everywhere.
Call off the birds.
Yeah.
They're flipping him a bird.
Wow.
Bad part was I was fired 2 weeks later. But that's how it goes.
Too hip for the room.
But it says too hip, gotta go.
Well, how that happened, it was weird.
Or was that when you were fired?
No, I was driving around. It was before Uber. But I had this one cab driver. He was like an independent cab guy that I kept getting because he lived by me.
Yeah.
So
Gypsy.
a gypsy cab.
Yep.
So I get this guy, and he's from Boston, and I'd be in the car, and he'd be going in his Boston accent, Fraze, you're too hip. You're too hip, Fraze. So I go, hey, can I borrow that?
Oh, that's where
Can I
you
use
got
that?
it.
Yeah. So I got it from that guy. And then I had a buddy in high school that was one of these guys. He was a good guy, but we called him Cameo because he'd show up and at a party or something, he'd stay for like 2 minutes and be like, gotta go. He's one of these guys, all the women loved him, and he had a GTO, and he could never really hang because he was always too busy. And usually he would go nowhere, but that's what his whole thing was, gotta go. So I put Too Hip and Gotta Go together, and it became a hook.
Yeah.
And then they put it on these rainbow stickers that they had that were real popular. And so it got all over town eventually.
Isn't that great?
Well, now, we're talking about an era of radio that obviously no longer exists. You were doing the morning drive, which is the coveted spot, even on progressive radio when everybody's sleeping, but people are listening. And I mean, today, do you think that you could get away with the content, what you said, what you did on the air today in today's standard?
Well, there is a whole new culture, and it is affecting us all, and it's worth talking about. And we were talking.
I'm sorry, I don't think we can talk about it.
Okay, well, you're probably right. Who needs to be canceled before we even talk about it? But we were talking about it at lunch that a favorite of the audience in Los Angeles was our spoof of the Rose Parade every year.
Yeah.
Philip did one with us, and
That's right. We would watch the Rose Parade and improvise stories about the floats.
This is for people out of town. The Tournament of Roses Parade
Yes.
in Pasadena, which everybody does know about. out. It's the big parade
It's a
on
New
New
Year's
Year's
Day.
Day.
And we tell
New
people
Year's
to turn on the TV and then turn down the sound and listen to us on the radio.
Exactly.
And you
Oh,
were on
gosh, that
what
was fun.
station
Well, we
was
were on
this?
KROQ, and we did that for 34 years.
Wow.
My goodness,
and it
I
was
didn't realize
huge.
that.
The fans loved it.
Yeah.
I later did it with Peter Crabb, who was work with Monty Python.
Oh.
I think you've met Crabman. He's really talented.
So give us a moment. Like,
Well-
what were you doing?
Well, we'd make fun of everything, on there. And then we would say stuff that anyway, they stopped doing it after 34 years because they knew we would be canceled after about 2 minutes.
Yeah.
You mean there was just
in
this
the new
Rubicon
culture.
at some point where it was...
Well, we would say stuff that you just can't say now.
Yeah, here comes the fascist German marching band. you know.
Well, yeah, and worse. And
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and everything we said was, a little off color, and we were
We were very off-colorful.
especially Crab. I'm going to blame it on him.
Yeah.
But he was able to ad-lib people's talking on TV. So he would
He could dub
their
people's-
voices
Yeah.
very quickly. And he would do the newscaster but he would do the Asian newscaster with an Asian women's voice,
Uh-huh.
or the black newscaster woman with black newscaster's voice. And you can't do that today. But
No.
he wouldn't be racial or anything about it. It was
No.
just saying silly things. You know?
Yeah, and it was a skill, too. I mean,
And he
a
was
skill
very
set.
quick at it. And he used to do it on his stand-up, too. He would take monitors that were we would play the Ice House, and they had TV monitors over the stage.
Uh-huh.
He'd do the same thing. He'd flip through with the remote. He'd flip through the
he'd
channels
do it
and
live.
ad-lib people's voices as he went during his
Genius.
stand-up. And he's a
Genius.
genius performer. And I was lucky to have him for a partner because he would just go crazy on there.
Well, that was a popular thing during that time. Other improv groups
Sure.
would do this. They turn on channel so and so.
Sure.
Well, heck, we used to do it on the Firesign.
You guys
Theater
did it
show.
all the time.
Yeah.
We basically stole it from you. You guys
Thank
were
you.
you guys were the geniuses at that.
You stole
But
everything from
it
us.
We did actually. And still
We were
continue.
trailblazers.
Wait till I steal some of this Bloomer stuff. But we really did get that from you guys,
Isn't that
and
great?
the public loved it. And the first couple I did with Phil Austin and with you, and but now you can't really do that. And again, I think it was pretty harmless stuff. It was a little edgy, but it wasn't nasty. It wasn't mean towards anybody really particularly.
Yeah.
And yet nowadays you do have that issue. We were talking at lunch again about some stand-up comics that were canceled before they even did their performance in Seattle.
How's that?
This is just like recently.
Yeah, it happened this week.
What happened?
Yeah, made national
They
news.
got canceled. I knew one of the comics, and they're just performers, stand-ups, and they had been, I guess the comedy club, had reviewed some of their stuff and said, listen, we're not going to have you guys on.
What, do you remember what the material was?
Well, I don't specifically know, but I know these guys. Again, it's the same thing.
Yeah, you know
It's
them.
not really, you're not really doing anything that's evil or
Really
or offensive towards anybody really. But you're telling it like it is, kind of stuff.
well, it's culturally too sensitive now, isn't it?
It
Well,
really
and-
is.
But it's also
You don't want to offend
It's
anybody.
also, in a sense, reverse racist because Dave Chappelle, who's a trailblazer, who stands up to that, but he can do things that I think, like Eddie Murphy, when he does a white man impersonation, it's hilarious. I don't think he'd get in trouble for that.
Well, as usual, you get a bit of a pass if you're a name. We were
Sure.
talking about Bill Burr. Bill's the top comic out there right now.
He's wonderful.
And I'm on his podcast network, All Things Comedy.
What is your show?
With my hockey show. It's called Puck Off. And I do that with Joe Bartnick. And we have a hockey podcast on his network. And he's the hottest comic out there. He plays everywhere in the world, sells out everywhere.
Yeah.
They just sold out in Iceland. I mean, that's how big he is.
Wow.
And he's got
He's hot in Iceland.
He's hot in Iceland, and they actually threw him in a volcano, and he
He survived.
The
right?
volcano left town, but he's very he can tell it like it is.
He can get away with
He's
stuff.
not anti-woman. He's
Right.
not anti anything
Right.
really. He's gotten the voice where he can sort of say that thing that other people can't say nowadays.
Yeah, that's really
He
the
says it in a
secret
very
to so
clever,
much-
a very clever way.
Yeah.
And he's very thoughtful and smart guy.
He
He's not-
personalizes it in such a way that it's not.
It's kind of
an
putting him
attack.
down. Most of it's him putting him down.
Yeah,
too,
like
you know.
becoming a character who is saying these stupid things. Really.
Yeah,
What
exactly.
do you
exactly.
suppose that is? I mean, do you think it's because the democratization of communication through the social media networks.
I think a lot of it has to do with social media.
Yeah.
You're reaching so many people now.
No, but the people that have said that don't have the delicacy of turning a phrase correctly and
well, that's right, Ted. I think it helps to be verbally adept and have some thoughtful things behind
chops,
what you. Now, taking a look at a guy like Howard Stern, a guy who pushed the envelope to the max throughout the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. Now he's getting criticized because his show is much tamer. He's pulled back, and he's a very good interviewer, one of the best.
Yes, he is.
But that's what he's doing now, is primarily that, and he's gone away from that other stuff. And yet there's some critics of that saying, well, how come Howard is kowtowing to the cancel culture and whatever? I don't know.
I don't think he kowtows to the.
I don't either. I think he's evolved.
He grew up.
Yeah, he evolved. Look, he's got 20-year-old daughters. He doesn't want to be doing that stuff he used to do. But he is primarily an interviewer.
But you're hitting on a very salient point there, which is that comics are talking to us, right? They're talking to us, and when we go to see a comedian, or go to an evening of comedy, we want to see our culture reflected in the material that they're doing. And some comics really can pull it off, because it's like personal to them, it seems to me. And others are maybe making fun of things or joking about things, and it creates an entirely different feeling.
Well, Phil, you're exactly right, and that's exactly it. If you have that capacity to do it correctly, or do it in a way that
personalize it, humanize it.
And that's what Bill does. He just comes across like a regular guy making comments that he feels are real. And
that's cathartic.
I think it is. I think for the audience it is.
That's what Richard Pryor did, and it was shocking and startling. But accepted.
Well, I think it's what all good comics do. And I remember Carson used to say, because I was a big Johnny Carson fan.
Weren't we all?
Yeah, he to me was the best.
I studied him.
The best of all.
Yeah.
And he used to say, no one will ever know my politics, because if I make a joke about a Republican, my next one's going to be about a Democrat.
That's right.
Because I don't want to lose 50% of my audience.
That's right.
And he kind of got that, so he would hit on both sides. And, today you get in some trouble for that. Jon Stewart just recently got in trouble. He came back to The Daily Show.
I watched him last night.
And he caught a lot of heat because he was sort of, instead of just taking a liberal stance, he was hitting on Biden a little bit and was kind of going after everybody. Equal opportunity offender kind of thing. And that was the old Carson dynamic.
Yep.
And a lot of his old fans got on him about that.
Yeah.
They didn't like that.
Well, you know what? It's like people are just a little too sensitive. I know things are rough now, but the whole point of comedy is to blow off that steam. And, it's not necessarily a political statement.
No,
it's
laughter
more about
is a release
of
tension.
I heard John Cleese say this. I think it was John Cleese said that there's a little thing that people don't always sometimes forget, which is irony. A lot of times you're making an ironic statement that isn't really pinpointing anything.
That's right.
It's kind of spoofing that actually.
I think he said it's ironic.
Yeah, probably.
Right.
But knowing him, but it is true though that you're not always saying something to
offend
somebody.
Right.
It's done a lot of times, and a lot of times you're actually spoofing that genre a little bit.
It's interesting though, because the right wing. My friends who are in the Midwest and are basically the right wingers. Let's just face it. Good friends of mine. They think that the liberals have no sense of humor, because the liberals are censoring humor. But that's not what's happening. It's not really political. It's social.
Well, there's humorless people. Yeah, there are humorless people on both sides of the spectrum.
Oh, absolutely.
But you can't like. Body
funny
shaming
is funny,
True, but stuff like body shaming is, you do have to be more sensitive
yes,
to
that's
stuff
right.
like that. You really do. And, so there's certain, I think, woke things that are valid. Definitely. But I also think there's some that are like, wait a minute.
Look at the line.
I'll give you an example. A friend of mine was at the Steve Martin Short two-man show.
Yeah,
brilliant.
Great show, right?
Yep.
And it was at Pasadena Civic, and he was in the lobby after the show, and a woman came up to the manager and said, I want my money back. And he goes, well, why? You didn't like the show? And she said, no, there were no women in the show.
Oh, wow.
Oh, my God.
And he goes, well, it's a two-man show.
Right.
And she goes, well, that's not very woke. You know.
Oh boy!
But I mean, that's an extreme example, and you know, you do have to stick up for women's rights, of course.
Of course.
But I thought that was a little silly.
It's kind of interesting because for decades we've been pushing the outrage comedy. You know how
shock
jocks.
Yeah.
And now it seems, and this is anecdotal, but it seems as though that has now pushed back and reflected on culture in general. And it's almost like the nightly guys like Kimmel and Colbert and Seth Meyers are almost reflecting on how outrageous the reality of it is, and they're almost pulling it back, saying, "Wait a minute, this is nuts." I mean, because how far can you go? So it's kind of this back and forth thing. I like to think we're in the post-comedic outrage era. Just now, you got to really just be smart and funny.
Well, that and you wonder,
and very observant.
Yes.
You have to be observant and tolerant of what you see, and make
I
it
do stand up all the time, and it's always an editing process.
You're even funny now, and you're sitting down.
Yeah.
Well, only when I sit down. When I stand up, all the humor goes away.
So you are doing stand. Where are you doing stand up?
Well, I play everywhere. I play at all the clubs. I'm at all the local LA clubs. I don't go on the road too often. Once in a while to Vegas. I play Vegas. And I only do the one-liner styles because I'm fans of Rodney Dangerfield and Carson.
Yeah.
So no one else is really doing that style. So I kind of have my own lane. And I think that's why things have been going pretty well for me. And I can just work that field, you know.
You kind of mind topical jokes.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I just do topical
You're really
stuff.
good at that.
And my latest one is Trump's got his new gold shoes out, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I said Joe Biden's says he's going to be wearing those gold shoes because now if he falls down, he can blame Trump.
Sure. Yeah, and you played to your biggest audience ever entirely by chance the other night. You told us at lunch, right?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Well, it was, and that's an interesting comic to bring up too because there's some stuff there we could
controversial
talk about.
stuff.
It's this guy Joe Coy. Joe Coy, very talented comedian.
Now he's Asian.
He's Asian. He's Filipino, and he's really good. And he had kind of a tough set at the Golden Globes. He was the host, and it really didn't go well. Yep. And I think it's because what you mentioned earlier, Ted. He doesn't have the big national name, so that when he was, making jokes about Taylor Swift or whatever, everyone got mad in the room because he couldn't do that. Whereas Ricky Gervais or someone with a bigger name can kind of do that.
And also you recognize their style.
Yes,
they made an impression with their style.
Exactly.
And you know what to expect.
There you go, Phil.
It's all about expectations.
Yeah, perfect.
It is,
perfect.
isn't it?
That's true, Phil. So anyway, he sold out the Forum recently 2 nights. That's 20,000 people a night. That's 40,000
So you see, bad publicity can help you.
It really can.
Right?
That's why I want to go on TV and bomb. Yeah. But so I go out there just to support my friend on a Friday night, and when I was leaving, I said goodbye, and he goes, "Hey, come back tomorrow night and do 5 minutes." So
at the Forum.
At the Forum. So
how many people is that?
About 18,000, and so I so I had to go up cold. There was no. I don't know why he did that to me. I love Joe, but that was like a phrase. Go up there. There was no introduction.
No premeditation.
It's in the dark, and I had to walk out. I couldn't even find the mic.
Oh, my God.
And I get out there, and all of a sudden the lights come on. Boom!
Ooh.
And there's 18,000.
Wow.
And,
that's a nightmare.
It was like a bad dream, yeah.
But there's no time to freak out.
I couldn't freak out, and that's what you said earlier.
We talked about
I didn't have time to think about it, or I probably would have been.
So you weren't nervous.
I really wasn't nervous. And I was shy, and that's what I was thinking about when I was performing. I was thinking, why aren't I nervous? And if I dare say so, I killed.
Excellent.
Oh, that's great.
And everyone, it just roared.
I can't imagine.
It was just a roar.
I can't imagine the energy you get out of that.
Boy, that's a mass murder. 18,000.
It almost knocks you over, and it was just mind-blowing to me.
Isn't that's so exciting? It must have felt
Now, when you go out and do
wonderful.
clubs, what kind of audiences do you play? Are the boomers coming out?
Well, a little bit of everything, really, honestly.
Do you find a continuity in all of the audiences you're playing at?
It is pretty similar everywhere.
You must have your own followers, too, right?
Yeah, and I feel very sorry for them. But yeah, I do have some followers.
And they're stalkers, really.
Yeah, stalkers really is what they are. And I have to pay them. But I'm fortunate to have fans, that are coming out. And I get them more and more as time goes on because I think they are enamored by seeing, like your show, The Boomers, an older guy still out there. I think that's my hook with
That's really great.
They're like, wow, and he's pretty hip. I all my stuff is right up to the moment. And I have a lot of young comics come up to me and they go, because I always try to be nice to the young comics. They come up and they go, hey, man, your stuff is more up to date than ours.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, because I'm pretty on top of things, I think. And then I was telling you about this. One thing, a show that I'm trying to develop, I host the open mic show at the Laugh Factory Club in Hollywood.
Which is near Laurel Canyon off of Sunset.
Yes.
On the corner there.
It's a famous club.
Yeah, always people outside. It's always.
And I'll
always
do that
hot.
later today. I'm going to go down and host that. And we're shooting it now. I have a crew that comes in and we're shooting.
So you're killing and shooting.
Yeah.
Wait a minute.
That's all I do now.
That's not good.
Well, I have a good lawyer.
Okay.
But I interview the people in the line because they have a famous line where people get there and wait for like 8 hours to go in.
8 hours?
And then I host the thing. And
Sounds like they're trying to vote.
Well,
Can they have water?
No. Well, Larry David showed up the other day with some water. But,
there you go.
He was immediately arrested. But so we're shooting that because I think it's fascinating that people from all over the world, there's people that come from Russia and from everywhere to catch their dream in Hollywood.
Now, when do you do this?
Every Tuesday.
And what is it exactly?
It's
Open mic?
It's called Open Mic, and we're calling it Laugh Factory Open Mic.
Okay, and this is going to be, you're hoping this is going to become a TV
Yeah,
thing.
we're shooting it as a demo, as a pilot.
Interesting.
Wonderful
Okay. And if
idea.
people want to come down, when do they do it?
Well, they can come down on Tuesdays. We really don't have an audience. The audience is the other comics.
Oh.
And traditionally, open mics are very dreary experiences.
Now, it is open to the public, though?
You could come in there, sure. But it's basically people that are trying to be comics. And
No, I understand that, but can an audience? Does an audience?
I don't know that
pay
we
to come
really
in?
have much of an audience. It's mostly just the other comics.
Okay, that's
But
interesting.
it's interesting, and some of the people are really talented, and some of them not so much. But
Right.
Stand-up is such a scary, tough deal. It's almost... I've never been really comfortable watching stand-up just because of that.
Hey, why do you think it was Procter & Bergman?
Our guest, Frazer Smith, the Fraze, legendary radio personality here. Beyond doing the phony coverage of the Tournament of Roses parade, you were also involved in another really wonderful quirk of Los Angeles, the Doodah Parade.
Well, that Doodah Parade was started as a spoof of the Rose Parade.
That's correct.
And we were in it. KROQ had a float in it, if you can believe that. We were all on the float, all the DJs. And I think...
Was it a root beer float? Or?
Oh, it was, actually, and I can't swim. So it was a little dodgy, but I remember we got kicked off the parade. I couldn't... How do you get kicked
How
out
do you
of
get kicked off the
How do you kick
Doodah?
out of the Doodah?
How do you do that?
I did not. Well, the Doodah Parade was...
Isn't it?
It's still going on.
I think it still goes on.
Oh, sure.
Well, there was one, I just remember they had, they would have in the Rose Parade, they'd have all those bands.
Yeah.
Well, they had the marching lawyers, and the briefcase lawyers.
Yes, the briefcase.
Briefcase
Right.
syncopation.
That's the one I remember.
Yeah.
But it was all just nutty stuff and fake, good
spirited
Marshal
stuff,
and-
yeah.
Yeah, just fun.
Again, looking at a distance from the East Coast, I'd see that and go, L.A., wow.
L.A.
Well, it was kind of like the Stanford Band.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Oh, yeah, having some fun with it, right.
Yeah.
And how did you get kicked off?
I don't remember exactly, but I think we tried to ram a building.
Well,
With a
that'll
float?
do it.
That'll do it, right? I think that's what happened. Not on purpose, of course.
K-Rock!
Yeah,
Right.
probably what happened. But we did have fun with that, and so many other things. One of the other things that we did was cover a Super Bowl. And I got a buddy of mine. It was Phil's friend, Lanny Watkins. Remember Lanny?
I do.
Lanny was a Firesign fan and a really good play-by-play guy. And play-by-play is hard.
Yeah.
So we were going to do the Super Bowl. It was me, Lanny, and Al Ramirez. And
Okay.
So,
Switchblade.
Yeah, Switchblade Ramirez.
Wielding
Yeah.
Switchblade Ramirez.
He hijacked the Super Bowl. So I woke up that morning. I look at the L.A. Times because back then there actually were newspapers.
Yeah,
so
what's
the L.A.
that?
Times front page, Super Bowl today, CBS television, KROQ.
Wow.
Frazer Smith, and Al Ramirez. Yeah. So
The
we were
word got out.
Yeah, and we almost got sued big time because you're not allowed to do that. You can't just hijack the rights to a big event like that. But we was KROQ, and so they couldn't really mess with it. We were in a tiny little studio, and what could they do? You know?
You were protected by the reputation
by just being
of the station.
annoying. Yeah,
Right.
We were too annoying to be touched, and I thought we did it was just hilarious. We just made fun of the whole thing. And,
That's great.
And yet Lanny did a real play-by-play.
Yeah, at the same time.
Yeah, and so it was that was cool. I think we did a Stanley Cup hockey game too, and I believe we also did a heavyweight championship boxing match.
That's a real niche,
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah.
Wow.
Well, you could make some money doing that these days. I think KPFK should think about it because that's a way you could syndicate that and make some pretty big money across the country.
Doing what?
You know, doing those special events.
Parodying a special event.
It could be anything from the coronation of the Queen to whatever.
Yeah.
You just take a big event and spoof it.
That's a really great idea because God knows there's a lot of comics in this town that would be able to fly into that pretty easily.
Yeah, and we were just lucky to be there. I mean, many people could do it probably better than we did, but we had fun with it, and it was something that really, back then, listeners really wanted something a little different.
Yeah.
And that was a little bit fresh. And they also, I think, get a little bored with regular coverage.
Well, the 60s were a very serious time for us with the Vietnamese War and the protests that were going on and an attempt to unseat the white men the old white men in suits. How did that work out for you? And it was a serious time.
Now we are the old white men in suits. Gosh darn it.
So we needed relief.
Yeah.
And we especially needed parody, satire and parody.
Well, that's why
of
you guys
things
were
that everybody took so very seriously.
That's why you guys were so popular, too.
We were there at the right time.
You really were. And also, it broke that chain. It broke the feeling that you had to always be serious.
That's exactly
And you lightened up the country.
That's right. We were also really, in a way, trying to unbrainwash people from commercialism in what we did.
Yeah.
But, talking about politically incorrect stuff. And we did a thing called the American Pageant was it How Can You Be in Two Places at Once? You're Not Where at All, I think, in which we used all of the derogatory names for all of the minority groups in a jolly song in order, again, to remove the power from them.
Well, that's also why I mentioned irony. Because that's an ironic piece.
Yeah,
You're not really saying those words.
No,
You're
we're not
spoofing those words
we're
actually taking the power out of them.
We're taking the power out of them.
Yeah, but it's some people, that's what I think is a little bit odd about what's going on today is that some people don't seem to get that you are doing that. They take it literally.
Some of those derogatory names, besides meaning places that people came from, are actually foreign words for beauty. For beautiful people, because the whole thing that scares people about minorities is that here's another race that's really beautiful and attractive, and that means that the neighborhood, which suddenly has these odd-looking, beautiful people in it, are going to take their girls and take their boys away from their own clan. It becomes a threat to them, you see.
Well, yeah, and please excuse me for using this word because I do not use this word, but it happened at the open mic. We had an English comic came over, and he had a very clever bit where he was showing English words that are different than American words.
We'll have to knock you up sometime.
Well, that kind of thing, right? So
means to call you up.
He got done, and I said, and I said, well, that was very clever. I go, now go smoke a fag. Which in English England means a cigarette, right?
That's right.
You're not using that word really. You're just using it as what they call a cigarette.
That's right.
And and the audience laughed. But I think there's some people that wouldn't find that funny, that would think that you were being offensive, but you weren't really. You were actually spoofing the fact that there's different words in different countries.
And all comedy just reflects the current events. Like in the 60s, when this was happening in the 70s, we were rebelling against the empire, the post-World War II empire, And then there was the military-industrial complex
That's
that
right.
Eisenhower warned against. And then we saw the young idealistic leaders shot down. There was a lot of heavy stuff going on.
Oh, wow.
Kids being shot by the National Guard. There was time for comedy. Now, we're in equally serious times
Pretty
now.
serious now, right?
And so the comics are only doing that job. I don't, you take the media, social media aside and all the political correctness engaged in that. It's still time for very cathartic comedy about what's happening, where we have a very successful KGB agent, career agent, running a totalitarian country who has done immense damage in the long game to our nation. And the whole Trump phenomena can be, you could probably tie a lot of
To
it
the
to
unity of nations, really. It's a direct attack.
There's a real attack on democracy going on globally now, and Putin is not done. And it's a really
it's scary, isn't
It's
it?
a very scary time, but it's
Yeah.
also what a great time for comedy.
I wrote a joke the other day, which was, if a king was displeased with a jester, he'd laugh their head off. Okay?
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what seems to be going on
And
right now. We need jesters. We need...
But the thing about the nighttime hosts, Colbert, they're the last of the collective mass media comics. And I think, because everything is so divided, and I think they're doing a great job keeping
really-
people healthy and aware of what's going on to make sure they don't forget.
And it
what's
is a
at stake.
choice.
What's at
It's a
stake.
personal choice if you want to watch something. That was the other thing about Firesign Theater. When we put out our records, it was a personal choice for somebody to buy it and play it in the privacy of their own home or dorm room. It was not, we weren't forcing it on anybody.
Yeah.
And then FM radio spread our fame in that way. But people would still go out and buy the records so that they could share it with other people.
Well, and it lightened up the mood for the entire country.
Yeah.
Well, that's what these comics do
And they're
for
still
us.
doing it. So it's great to see that you're still doing it.
Well, you say that, but if you saw my act, no.
Well, if people want to see your act,
Well, I am at the Laugh Factory in Hollywood. I'm there this Thursday night, and I'm at the Comedy Store every Monday night in Hollywood.
Great.
And please come see a show.
Frazer Smith, thank you so much for coming to the Sexy Boomer Show.
Oh, my pleasure, guys. Best of luck to you. I love you guys, and your show is awesome, and this station is awesome.
Yes, it
Please
is.
send in some
send a
donations to keep
contribution
this
to
thing
this.
going.
Thank you,
man.
Fraze.
It
Thanks
is
so
a
much.
rocking place.
All right. We'll see you next week. I'm Ted Bonnet.
I'm Phil Proctor.
And this
And
is
I'm Coco Lewis.
And this
Hey,
is
go
the
Lewis.
Phil and
Good
Ted
night,
Sexy
everybody.
Boomer Show.
Jack
Again,
Bond.
you can find us at sexyboomershow.com and on all your podcast platforms.
You won't really find us. We're not going to be there in person. Okay.
Bye.